Let's see how we do here. Do we restart? Yeah. Okay. So, hey, everybody, it's Barry Climate here in the Playground Principles podcast. I'm completely honored, no BS, to sit here and meet my new friend, Harvey Araton. We have nothing and everything in common. He's a real author. I'm a fledgling author. I think I have to joke about this. The thing we have most in common, I would say, is we're both deteriorating tennis players. I could, I couldn't help but pluck that off of your Facebook profile because as we get older, we have the will, but man, it just gets harder to dig balls out of the corner. So I don't know.
Well, the last time I tried to dig a ball out of the corner, I tore my Achilles.
Yeah, there you go.
And that was in June of 24, and I have not been on a tennis court since, though I am fully healed and the surgery went really well, recovered nicely for someone my age, but I haven't gotten over the mental hump
Yeah,
of getting out there because I don't want to be one of those stationary players,
of course.
even in the doubles game. And so I'm contemplating making a comeback in the spring, but I haven't quite decided yet, but we shall see.
Get out there. I have had similar experiences, although fortunately I've not torn my Achilles. My younger brother has a woman he hits with, and her name happens to be Alexa. And I said to him, Lou, just say, "Hey Alexa, just hit it cross court," so you don't have to move. You can get to hit balls back and forth. But yeah, once you have one of those injuries, and again, I'm a little older than you, but at our age, it does get a little daunting, for sure. But I think I told you before we start recording, your book, When the Garden Was Eden, is just, it strikes me very deeply. That Nick team, I'm from Philly, but that Nick team that you wrote about was just, it was my favorite team of all time. The way the game was played speaks to everything I love about the game. Share the ball. I just wrote this book called The Playground Principles. It's very much rooted in how that team played the game. Your backstories, like I told you before about Earl, are amazing. But what attracted me to ask you to come on this is your new book, or the book that's yet to be published. And I really want you to um, talk about the goal of the game. I've been involved in youth sports forever. But I just suspect that there's something about that book. So tell me, coming from some of the books that you've written about pro athletes and Nick teams and so forth, to what drove you to write this book, The Goal of the Game?
Well, I've written prior to this book 9 books.
Yeah.
A couple were co-authorships. One was an anthology collection of New York Times reporters and columnists, include myself included, on the growth of the NBA from the 70s to the 21st century. Um, this is my first book that is written for children, and um, it's while it's a soccer centric book, and that's because both my sons, went through the whole rec town league experience to travel team to select team to high school soccer. Um, I yeah, they played other sports too. My younger son played basketball. My older son played some tennis. But I felt like the most complete experience they had from your early ages, 5 through high school age, were related to soccer. And so I would say around the turn of the century, Barry, we're old enough to remember when, let's just say, Little League Baseball, for instance, the Little League World Series,
Wooden Sport PA.
there was one game a year
Yep.
that was televised. Do you remember the program that it was on every once a year on Saturday afternoon? It was ABC's Wide World of Sport.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah,
You challenged me and I got it right after you said it. But
yeah.
yes,
And it was a novelty, right?
it was.
It was a cool thing. Hey, I grew up in Staten Island in 1964. The Mid Island Little League won the World Series, and the
Oh,
kid I
wow.
went to high school with, named Dan Yacarino, came within one strike of a perfect game against Monterrey, Mexico. So I grew up with that, but it dawned on me right around 2001 2001, 2002, that we suddenly were in an era where ESPN was televising every game of the Little League World Series. And as a columnist for the Time, for the New York Times at that point, um, the light bulb went on in my head, and the question, are we celebrating kids or are we exploiting them for network profit? And I didn't ask the question to make a judgment necessarily. It was just to raise the question. Where are we headed in youth sports in this country? And so I did a column. I called up the Little League people, and I also called up a child sports psychologist.
Mm.
And I'll never forget what he told me when I asked him about this particular issue. And he said, kids appearing on television, not that big a deal. Kids have been on game shows. We grew up with shows like Wonderama. I was on a game show when I was a little kid,
No
probably
way.
about
Wow.
6 or 7 years old. Um, and he said, that's not the problem. The problem is, what will parents, communities, coaches do to get to those kids to that national stage level? What will they do? What kind of pressure will they exert? How much money will people spend? All of these questions that, you know, will have a profound or could have a profound effect on the youth sports experience. So over the next few years, I did a bunch of articles that explored these topics. I did a 4,000 word story on USA Soccer's mandate that you couldn't play high school and club soccer at the same time. You had to choose one or the other, which created for kids a really challenging decision. Do I give up playing with all the kids who I grew up with in my community to play with a bunch of kids who are strangers to me, on a regional team? And finally, in a few years after I left the Times staff, simply because I just didn't want to travel anymore, I realized that all those stories that I had written about youth sports were essentially targeted to adults who read this Times sports section.
Yeah.
And I decided I wanted to try to write something that would be directly related to children.
Mm.
And the reason why I chose the middle grade age range, which is, 8 to 12, give or take, depending on the reader, the reason why I chose that age range to write this novel um, for was that I feel like these are the most vulnerable ages where kids are first learning to play a sport. They're learning how to be a teammate.
Yep.
They're learning how to develop their skills. They're learning to feel good about themselves on the field. And the last thing they need are all these outside community pressures, whether they're coming from the parents or the coaches or their peers, about, hey, if you really work hard, you could win a college scholarship, or we're spending a lot of money to get you the special training. All of those reasons, if those are the reasons why a kid at the age of 7, 8, 9 years old is playing a sport, those are the wrong reasons. And so that's why I chose this age group to write a novel that I really wanted to convey to children of that ages the right reasons to be playing a sport, regardless of which sport it is, to not make it like the individual sports, not to turn team sports into tennis, golf, gymnastics, where it's highly individual and highly instructive from very young ages, and usually from families of affluence,
Yeah.
right? Team sports at those ages should be about the pure joy of learning and participation. They have plenty of time as they get closer to 11, 12 to show whether they are gifted and talented enough and driven enough to play potentially at a higher level.
We are physically about 3,000 miles apart at this moment, but if I was next to you, I'd give you a hug. It, it's such an important. I'm so excited to read the book. And again, I didn't know that much about it, but intuitively I suspected that this what it was about. And I, I know you're right. I know
Barry,
what you mean.
let me say that I don't want any readers of the book or parents who might be listening or coaches to think that I am somehow against, the um, you know, the places for the truly gifted kids to play and compete, right? Nothing wrong with a kid going to an advanced level. Um, the problem is that, uh, you know, the New York Times did a story in July essentially about the evolution of youth sports in this country. Would you believe that it's now a $40 billion
Yeah,
industry?
I would. I
There
mean,
are,
I guess that's huge, but I
yeah,
know it's expansive. But keep
yeah.
going. Sorry.
So there are now, major private equity companies investing heavily in youth sports. In that story, the Times focused on um, a company called Unrivaled Sports,
Yep.
which has been founded by Josh Harris and David Blitzer. And these guys happen to be the owners of the Philadelphia 76ers. And, their aim is to create the best youth sports experience with the best facilities, the best national tournaments, and all of that, that goes into, this high end stuff. And that's all well and good, but we've come a long way from the days of parent volunteers. And if it's a $40 billion industry, that means that there are a hell of a lot of families in this country forking over some heavy amounts of cash. And the truth of the matter is, when they're being given that sales pitch, when their kids are 7 or 8 years old, they really have no idea what their kid's potential is at those ages. The kid who's the star of the soccer team at the age of 8 might be a very average, if that good, player by the age of 12 or 13. So, you know, I just think that it's not something that's going to reverse itself.
No,
No more than college sports is going to be about pure amateurs anymore.
no.
Once the money gets into it, there's no pulling that ship back to port. The point of my book is to communicate with children and to parents, for that matter, but
Yes.
mainly to children, that whatever level you play at, when you are of those early ages, play for the love of the game, for the learning of the skills, learning to be a good teammate, learning to coexist with kids of all different backgrounds. And if you do those things,
Yep.
the truth is, you'll actually give yourself, and if you master all those things, you will give yourself a better chance to make it at those higher ends after your body develops more, and you're a young adolescent, because the foundation of being a good team sport athlete will be laid right then and there in your early developmental years. You can worry about the college scholarship, whether it's D1 or 3 or anything at all, or just being a decent high school athlete when you get closer to those ages. I think too many parents are being sold a bill of goods, and that pressure. Kids are very perceptive, as you know. They understand their parents are investing a lot of money and time into their very young athletic careers. And I worry that the kids are going to carry around too much pressure to live up to those ambitions at a time when, as I said, they should really be focused on what it means to be a good teammate, a good team sport athlete, and to be open to learning, to be coachable, all of those things that we like to idealize as the beauty of youth sports.
Like I said, if I was next to you, I'd give you a hug. I mean, it's vital. I've had on this podcast before Coach Phil Martelli from St. Joe, and he got wind of my book, and I never met the man. And I got a text out of the blue, and he said, "Barry, I just got wind of this magnificent book." I got introduced to him by some people at Philadelphia Black Basketball Hall of Fame, and we had a long talk about it. And he said everything you just said. I mean, in his own way. And he has young sons, and he said, "I just dropped him at the playground." I said, "Figure out how to organize a game," and because this is this is what it is, and it is life skills. And I wrote this little 100-page book, but it's all about this because these skills are vital. You know, whether or not parents, young kids have young parents, and you and I are we don't have young kids, we're not young, but we've lived through this at different levels and at different crucibles. Like you said, your kids played organized, but you're not wrong because regardless of all else, when you're seven, you're seven. You have a 7-year-old brain, right? And it can only process so much stuff. And you're just so right. I really hope your book and the messaging. I wrote down, I think I read somewhere where you said you were working with a bunch of kids and it was harder than you imagined. I guess you brought a panel of kids together. Is that correct? Did I read that, or did I pull that out of a thread on Facebook?
No, I'm actually in the town where I live, Montclair, New Jersey. Next month in January, we're going to have the book. The book is available now for pre-order, but
I'll be
whether
ordering one.
on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or whatever. But we're going to we have a local bookstore that we love, and we're going to have an event. And so when we talked about how we want to structure it, I said the last thing I want is for people to come out and listen to me pontificate.
Sure.
I would like to have a group of young athletes, youngish, I should say, um, come out and talk about their experiences. So I've put together a panel that includes um, 3 or 4 college players, different sports. One kid played D1 lacrosse at Syracuse,
Mm,
uh, and another one played D3 soccer at Trinity um, here in the Northeast, and another young woman was an All-American at University of Virginia in basketball and wound up playing 4 years for the Liberty. I knew
wow.
her since she was a little girl
Wow.
because my younger son played on a YMCA travel team with her older brother. And I saw this kid had potential from the start. She
Right.
could have played on the boys' team and been one of the best players, even though she was 3 years younger. So, because I want to discuss as much as I can with parents, um, you know, to, you know, to listen to their kids. Um, what a kid might be want at 7 may not be what that kid wants at 10.
Hello.
I always tell the story of my older son, who from early days on wasn't the biggest, fastest kid on the field, but he showed, when you see a kid who has that, what I like to call the vision thing,
Yep.
sees the game on a horizontal level, right? Most kids, the average kid runs up and back.
Yep.
He
Yep.
saw things developing peripherally. I used to always, when when I was first on the Knicks beat back in the early days, and people would kill Spencer Haywood, and say, he grabs a rebound, then he cradles the ball, and then he looks around and dribbles the ball, you know, they would call him selfish. And I would say, that may be a pejorative that is not applicable to the guy. I watch him play and I see a guy who he just doesn't see the floor.
Yep.
Then there's a guy like Larry Bird comes along and he has eyes in back of his head. That's not something you necessarily practice.
No.
It's something that often is just genetic or whatever it is, just a skill that you can improve on those things, but you can't create it.
No.
In any event, my older son, had those skills you could see when he was 6, 7 years old. So the first year he was eligible to try out for the travel team here in our town. I said to him, and I knew a couple of kids that he had been playing with, his good friends were going to go do it. So I said to him, Alex, would you like to try out for the travel team after the spring season is over? And he said, not really. And I felt like deflated. Like, I was competitive in sports.
Sure.
I'd been around the greatest athletes in every sport for my entire adult career, went all over the world, from the Olympics to the Dream Team in Barcelona to,
Wow.
Wimbledon tennis, all these things. So, of course, I've been around great athletes. And what parent wouldn't harbor a dream, even if it was had like a 0.2% chance of ever coming true, that their kid might be a great athlete? So in that moment, I remember being deflated. Now, over the next few weeks, I must have found ways to rephrase the question a half dozen times. And every time he would say, nah,
Yeah.
not really. And finally, after about the sixth time that I asked him, he said to me, Dad, if I don't try out for travel, can I still play in the town league? And I felt this, Barry, I felt this sense of shame wash over me,
Yeah.
because here I was thinking that, I'm a sports journalist. I know the rights and wrongs. I've seen the crazy parents and all this stuff. And here I am imposing my ambitions
Yeah.
and my values on this 7-year-old kid who just wanted to be outside playing, enjoying the fall and spring weather, playing with his friends, looking forward to the cookies after the game, maybe doing one or two things on the field that he would take with him home to feel good about himself, right? Youth sports at its simplest fundamental level, right? And I was imposing something like, hey, he could be D1's, all that stuff. And I was humbled, and I never forgot that experience,
Well,
how he made me feel. And you know what the funny thing is? 2 or 3 years later, I think going into fourth grade or fifth grade, he came to me and said, I think I want to try out for travel.
oh wow.
When he was good and
He
ready,
was ready, of course.
9 or 10 years old, he went to travel team, moved up, flirted with select team. A few years after that, decided that wasn't for him.
Yep.
Played 4 years in college,
Hmm.
played club soccer or no intramural soccer in college, and had a nice little, you know, modest soccer career, which is all he ever really wanted from it, and all he remembers are the good things. There was no pressure on him, but I have to say that he was wiser than his father
I-
in that first year. He told me what he wanted,
Yep.
and that's what we did. So listen to your child. They'll let you know what they really want out of sports.
No. What this is such a great story. I mean, and it's great for you to be so forthcoming about it because I think it's instructive to so many parents. And again, young kids have young parents. Uh, what what was the episode, as you best recall, that I'm not trying to bring out the shame. I'm tr I'm trying to get a teaching moment here. Like what was the episode where you said, "Geez, I'm an idiot. What am I doing here?" Like what made you recognize or brought the shame?
I
It,
think it was just a simple question that, he was professing or expressing his childhood innocence. He wasn't thinking about, I'm sure, can't put myself exactly back in the mindset
of
of
course,
when he was 7 years old, but I'm sure I was thinking, oh, geez, Nick's going to try out, and Jake's going to try out, and Marcus is going to try out. My poor little boy is going to be left behind, right? He wound up outlasting all of those
of
kids in
course,
soccer
of course.
because he did it at the time when he was more comfortable. So I think it really was just the sense of just let the kid be a kid.
Let the kid be.
Don't force it on him. You offer it if it's available and you can afford it, you can offer it to them, but don't make it out to be anything that's life defining for them particularly at those early ages.
Right.
I'll tell you another quick story, Barry. My younger
Please.
son was a peanut. I mean, he was really small. And when he was and of course, being 3 grades behind his brother, anything that his older brother was doing, he wanted to do. So when he was old enough to try out for travel soccer, the very first year, going into second grade, he said, I'm there. I'm trying out, right? So he made the B team, but when I say he was small, he looked like everybody's little brother who just wandered out to the pitch, right? And so the first year he's on his team, and even though he was small, he was a feisty little guy, and he was probably one of the two or three best players on the team.
Wow.
So after the season is over, the spring season, we get a call from the parent manager of the A team, and they say, we want to bring Charlie up to the A team. And now my chest swells with pride. Yeah, my little guy, he's little, but he's tough, all of that stuff. And then my wife and I take a walk around the corner with our dog, and we talk about this. And we make a decision that we think it's best for him, particularly at his size. I mean, he was the smallest in his grade, smaller
Right.
than all the girls, that we think that he's best suited to be, at this point in his little life, to be one of the best players on his team rather than the 14th or 15th best player and sit on the bench on the A team. So without even consulting him, we just called the parent manager of the A team and said, no, thank you. We'll keep Charlie where he is, right? The upshot to the story is that he didn't become a great soccer player. He played throughout his years, usually on the B team, and he played some in high school. But the reason why he didn't continue all the way through high school was because around sixth or seventh grade, he fell in love with basketball. And this little guy who was 4 foot 10 or 11 when he went to high school, because he felt good about himself and he was a tough little kid, made the freshman basketball team at a 2,000 student high school
Nice.
and wound up playing 4 years of high school basketball, even though he really didn't even hit puberty until he was like early in his junior year. He
Wow.
had no hair under his arms.
Right.
And it was a pretty remarkable thing. But you know, as parents, when we take inventory of all the things we did right and all the things we screwed up,
Yeah.
that was one of the things we always believed we did right because this guy, because he was on a team where he was allowed to feel that he was good and he could compete despite the fact that he was small, took that confidence into onto the basketball court where he couldn't beat guys off the dribble, he couldn't
Right.
jump over anyone, but he understood the game. He worked on his outside shot, so if he was alone, he knew how to get a team into its offense. And the coaches, they spotted this right away. They took him on the team, and he had his growth spurt. He wound up being about 5'9.5", played his varsity year as a senior,
Amazing.
played club ball in college, still plays in men's leagues now as a 32-year-old. And it's just an example of, parents not automatically always thinking pushing ahead is the best way for their child. I think letting him play at the right level for him when he was that small and was at such a young age allowed him to feel good about himself so that he didn't get discouraged and quit all sports together.
Right.
And I felt like we helped. I mean, most of it came from him, but I feel like we helped him find the right place that allowed him to enjoy sports throughout his young life and into adolescence and now into adulthood. When we know that, I think the last statistic I read, Barry, on this is that 60 to 70% of kids who start playing a sport at their early grammar school ages wind up quitting by the time they're 13 or 14. And sometimes it's because there's just too much pressure
No
and
doubt.
too much focus placed on pushing it to the highest level. Sometimes it's just good to let them be where they're the most relaxed, the most comfortable, and where they can perform the best.
Let your kids be kids is the bottom line. I mean, I didn't know any of this, of course, right? We're meeting here for the first time today, but I just somehow knew when I read about your book, again, your other book, particularly Garden Eden, I love, whatever. But when I read about the goal of the game, I just somehow knew that I needed to speak with you about it, and it's such an important message. And I mean, in many ways, you're living proof because you had a situation with your first your older boy, where your ego got in the way, right? You were not necessarily got in the way, but you, you got struck by it, and then you came to realize, however long later, that you weren't handling it the way that was in the best interest of your older boy. Is that the one that just got married, by the way?
No, the one who just got married is actually the younger one.
Okay, well,
So
congratulations about
yeah,
that, by the
thank
way.
you, thank you. But yeah, you know, the book, the goal of the game is, you know, you write fiction. One thing I'd written one other novel that was, you know, for adults about 10 years ago. That was based on a newspaper strike that I was involved in at the New York Daily News back in the early 1990s. But the one thing, the one thing you learn, or I learned, writing about writing fiction, is that you can take real events or characters or people in your real life and just put them into a fictionalized scenario,
Yep.
but then do whatever you want with them. You know, it's you're not bound by any,
Right.
you know, rules of nonfiction. I write about, you know, LeBron James, or I'm constricted by the parameters of his life.
Sure.
Um, can't make it up.
Right.
But that's the beauty of fiction. So people who know my kids, if and when they read this book, they will figure out, you know, which characteristics of the main character come from the older one and the younger one. Um, but then, of course, there's a whole lot of made up stuff to, you know, to facilitate the telling of the story.
You're like Springsteen, you interject stuff in there. You Jersey guys are all the same. You take some of real life and you interject it in there, and soon you'll start singing about it like Bruce.
If people could tolerate my voice, you know, that would be a possibility, but
No, but I know what you mean,
unlikely.
and I think I'm very excited to read it. Of course, I really am. And again, this has been a big part of my last 20 plus years of my own life. Not really with my kids. I founded a program at a Hebrew day school across the way because there was nothing. And I said to myself, I'm being a shitty father because my kids were not really into organized sports, but uh, I was. So I just built a program really so the school could have one. And we got notorious after that, and built a gym and all that. So, if you do it the right way and for the right reasons, but as I told you before, I got involved with it more, but never with my own kids. But I saw this story that you're talking about repeat itself time and time and time again. And you said before, I think you used different words, but the genie's out of the bottle now you know, with the money that's going into it. But I just think your message is so important. I have a question. Um, is the target market of your book the parents or the kids?
Oh, it's definitely the kids. I think that's why I mentioned earlier I wanted to write something after all those articles for the Times, um, that I wanted to convey these the positives of, you know, of youth sports, what they really are for this particular age group. I mean, there is plenty of time, as I said, you know, the I I admire the great athletes. We shouldn't hold back the truly gifted and talented kids any more than we would hold back the great musicians, the great artists. Um, you know, and it's just that there are so many millions of kids playing sports that when this $40 billion industry is holding out this carrot to the parents, they really need to understand the statistical improbabilities that their kids are among those chosen few who might get the D1 scholarship, and all of that, or beyond, become an Olympian or a professional athlete. Um, but definitely to the kids. And it was not easy for me, Barry, to really put myself in the mind of a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
Um, and so the main character, whose name is Zane, but He's known throughout the book as Z.
Z.
He narrates the story,
Nice.
and um, so that took a lot. I read several middle grade novels to try to, you know, get the gist of that voice. And even then, I wasn't particularly sure. I'm writing sentences, and all of a sudden, I look back on the previous paragraph, and I say, "Oh God, no 12-year-old would use that word or turn of phrase. Delete that. Go back to it." It happened over and over and over again. Um, but I felt that, I hope, what I would ideally hope is that kids will read it, but then their parents, since we know that the youth sport experience is really a partnership in many ways between the parents and the children, who are heavily involved. I mean, when I played, it's funny, we talked before about the playground and kids organizing themselves. When I think back to my childhood sports experiences, the ones that I'm most fond of are the ones, I grew up in public housing in Staten Island,
Wow.
and our oasis, our little, you know, square happy place were the basketball courts,
Yep.
and right in the middle of our housing development. And it was a very diverse, racially diverse, ethnically diverse community. You know, None of us came from any kind of money, but we did have basketball and we did have each other. And then there was the schoolyard where we played softball on cement or touch football. And or some days we just put on skates, and we had these little grassy areas with chain link fences, and we played roller derby, and we'd knock each other into the grass. Those to me are the happiest times. Now, I did play organized sports, and and I love that too. But the difference between the organized sports that I played and what's going on today, A, you didn't have to pay to play, so it
Right.
wasn't just kids from families with money.
Right.
And B, the parents weren't leering over our shoulders game in and game out. I think of maybe a half dozen times where my parents, mainly my father, came to watch me play in a basketball game. Um, they were too busy working, and it wasn't this big event. And now, I get it. I understand why parents love it so much. I loved it when my kids were playing. First of all, after a long week of work, what could be better than watching your kid, your boy or your son or your daughter, play soccer on a beautiful fall afternoon, or baseball, or being in a gym in the winter, a nice heated gym,
Yeah.
watching a basketball game. And so there's that. There's the excitement of the weekend game. And then there's the social experience, because after 2 or 3 years of this, you build up a network of friends who are all in it together. And then there's the hamburger stops after the game on the way home or whatever. So I get the appeal of it for the parents. So when I say it's a partnership, parents are heavily involved, not just financially, but emotionally. And so again, I went on a tangent a little bit,
Not at
but
all.
to the question of, I obviously targeted this book to kids, but I'm hoping that parents will participate with their kids and discuss it. And the parents can quiz the kids. What did you get out of this? How are you feeling about the way the book ends? How are you feeling about the decision that the main character made, or that some of the things that happened along the way in the story, where some of his best friends on the original soccer team that they started in, kindergarten and first grade, when his best friends got cut because they were moving up to a level where certain kids couldn't compete at,
Yep.
and how that affected the main character. All of these things are, issues that most kids who play organized youth sports are going to deal with throughout their young years. And it affects kids in different ways. But I would hope that it would kind of ignite a discussion between the children reading the book and the parents who may read it either with them or apart from them, or just to participate in some kind of discussion. That to me would be my is my real ambition to just launch a discussion. And again, I'm not passing judgment
No,
on
no,
this
it's what you
level
do.
or this level.
Yeah.
I think I think and hope that whatever level athlete, whatever level it is they play at, whether it's the rec league, the travel team, the elite team, um, that that a kid can appreciate what the story is trying to convey about the real benefits of youth sports.
Yeah, and appreciate the game. I want to ask you a question. I have a 7-year-old grandson. Can I, and I read to him when there's sleepovers.
Mhm.
Can I read this book to him?
Absolutely. I
Okay.
mean, absolutely. I think that when I say 8 to 12, I always say give or take.
But is it okay for a grandparent to read this book as a nighttime reading and have a
Oh, yeah.
discussion, right?
Yeah.
Whether
I
he's
mean,
7 or 8 wasn't really the issue. I more meant like in a collaborative way.
oh, yeah.
Okay.
When my kids were young, I remember my older son, for whatever reason, had a fascination with Muhammad Ali. And
A lot of reasons.
and I want to say when he was about 10 or 11, somebody came out with a book called um, Fighting Ali, and it was chapters on a whole bunch of the fighters who had gone up against Ali and had to deal with the boasting and the taunting and just what it was like to fight this guy who was literally larger than life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And he loved it. And instead of he was certainly old enough to read it on his own, but it became a father-son bonding experience. And we would read a chapter every night. And the names from my childhood were like bouncing off the pages. Joe Bugner, Chuck Wepner,
Yeah.
all these guys, Ken Norton, and they all talked, and somewhat lovingly about fighting Ali, but also about, how difficult it could be because of the personality he was, and also getting hit in the face constantly with his left jab,
Yeah.
um, not the least of it. So, I would wholeheartedly recommend it. Now, I think on the younger end, there are some things in the book. There is a trauma. In most middle grade fiction, there's some kind of
Yeah.
family trauma that sets up, you know, the conflict in the story and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I think this book will leave kids feeling really good about, how the story unwinds, and the ending, I think, is really uplifting, and at the same time, um, a real positive about the true benefits of being a young athlete.
It may impact them more 5 years after they read it, right? I mean, in a life event or whatever it is. I think I'm so excited, really, that somebody with your abilities took on this topic. I
Yeah,
really am.
Barry, when you get to a certain age in our lives and careers, it becomes, you know, I got caught up in the whole competitive journalism life. I went from my local paper in Staten Island to the New York Post, which was a huge sports paper. I
Oh yeah,
covered basketball there with Peter Vesey, who was probably the most well-known basketball columnist,
yeah, terrific
um,
basketball writer.
yeah, of our era. Um, and then I went to the Daily News for a bunch of years, and then on to the New York Times for 25 years. And yeah, I got caught up in it. I was really competitive, but there's a nice point in life that you reach where you say, "Look, I kind of done what I set out to do." I say that modestly. I
Oh,
come
it's fine.
from a working class background. I never imagined I could be so fortunate to have this kind of career, but you do reach that point of satisfaction where whatever I'm going to do, I like to still do some stuff to stay sharp as I can, just
Yep.
like you're doing this. Um, and so, whatever project I embark on, it's got to be something that I feel has some contributory value, something I want to say, and if it's 12 people, if it's 12 kids that I reach, with this book, I'm okay. I'm okay.
As well you should be, by the way.
I'm not out to break the bank. I'm not out to, you know, to guarantee a sequel or a three-book deal, which is all the things we strive for in our,
Sure.
in the prime of our careers. I'm just out to, if I get three emails from parents at some point over the next 5 months, they say, my son really or my daughter really read your book and really there was a true life lesson from that. Thank you. Um, that'll be all I need.
No, I'm again, I would hug you if I were next to you because I do get it. But you don't know what you don't know is one of my favorite lines, but you put it out there and you see what happens. And I told you with my own, when I just got introduced to Matt Painter through my 100-page little playground principles book. You don't know, but you have a story to tell and you have life experiences to tell and you have a gift to tell it with your writing abilities. So, like I said, I'm so thrilled that somebody with your abilities and skill took on this topic because I think it's vital. And again, in many, many ways, I wrote about it too, but not with the storytelling ability that you have. But it's just important because otherwise they're going to get dragged into this other sort of vortex, which doesn't suit most 7-year-olds, right, or 8-year-olds or 9-year-olds, and whatever. So I'm really just I'm so excited to read it. And tell me, do a little infomercial for me. When does the book come out? And will it be an Audible book? Will it be hardcover only? Can I get it on Kindle? Tell me a little bit about it so I can share it with everybody else.
Yeah, it's available for pre-order now. It publishes mid-December, um, and it'll ship. For anyone who orders it has ordered it now. It'll ship right on the publishing date of this. I think it's the 16th of December. So anyone who orders it for in time for a Christmas gift or Hanukkah gift would probably get it in time. But beyond that as well, and it's available mainly through Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I have a website, harveyaraton.com, where they could read more about the book and also order it through there. It is available hardcover and softcover, um, and also for Kindle. I do not believe, children don't listen to books um, as much as adults do. So it is available for Kindle for kids who do read on
Sure.
ebooks, but softcover, hardcover, whichever someone would prefer.
I'm going to buy one and then I'm going to send it to you because I want you to inscribe it for me and mail it back to me. But
I would be happy to.
I want to own one for sure. Again, it's just an exciting topic to me, and I'm very grateful that took the time to spend here with me speaking about it. Um, you'll send me a link to pre-order so I can, once I post this. Sometimes it takes me a little bit to post the actual replay of this, but I still want to put it up there. Whether or not they get it for Christmas or Hanukkah is well, it is what it is what it is. But please, you'll send me a way to order it.
Sure.
Actually, I think I saw is a link to order it on your website, your Harvey
It
Araton
is, yeah.
website.
But I'll send you the links and
Yeah, but please do because you have such a robust level of experiences. You mentioned being in Barcelona and bunch of tennis matches. Have a favorite dream team story?
I do.
May I?
Sure. And it's sort of post Dream Team story,
Oh, whatever.
but and it speaks to the different eras that we live in that I've worked in. So um, I spent the entire summer with the Dream Team from the training camp in La Jolla to the Tournament of the Americas in Portland,
Hmm.
Oregon, and then on to Monte Carlo for a week of training prior to the game, and then to Barcelona. Tough life I lived that
Yeah,
summer.
I was gonna say I'm really sorry for you, but
And in Monte Carlo, we stayed in the Loews Monte Carlo, which was this beautiful hotel right on the Mediterranean Sea. And there was a glass enclosed health club at the very top of the hotel. And I'd go up there to just do some cycling or walk on the treadmill or something. And the guys would be up there. I'd known Chris Mullin since he was in high school, so he was like an old friend. But you know, Patrick Ewing would come up and Barkley um, and it was like a one big family and Karl Malone, and so after we came back, now remember, Magic had retired with HIV uh, that prior fall, but then played in the All Star game that winter, and then on the Dream Team, and that was a big celebration of the greatest players in the world,
Sure.
and all the games were blowouts, and and it was such a wonderful experience and a positive one for Magic that as soon as we got home, Magic announced that he was unretiring and coming back. And so at that point, I was at the Times and I was the national NBA writer. And so, like every other NBA writer in the country, I was assigned to do a Welcome Back Magic story. And so this was one night in October, it was a Tuesday night, and I decided I was in my office and I decided to walk the 8 blocks down from 43rd Street, where our office was, down to Madison Square Garden and just talk to some players about Magic. So I got there early and I walked into the Utah Jazz locker room. They were playing the Jazz in a preseason game. And there, sitting by himself with just his uniform shorts on and nothing else, was Karl Malone. And he looks up and he said to me, um, "Hey man, how you doing?" He recognized me from, I don't think he knew my name.
Right.
He plays on the other side of the country and stuff. And I sat down next to him and I did not have a recorder. I just had my notebook in different time. And I just said, "Karl, how you doing? I'm doing my Welcome Back Magic story. And he looked at me and he said, you know, I ain't no fan. I'm a competitor. And he went on to essentially say that most of the league was terrified of playing in what games that would be very different from what the games on the Dream Team were like, right? And that he was essentially saying that, you know, he said, I'm a competitor. I'll do whatever I have to do. If I have to hit Magic coming down the lane, I'll do it. But I don't know about the rest of these guys in here, and I'm all about the competition. Karl was a little bit of a different kind of guy.
Yes.
Um, his viewpoint was somewhat unenlightened because remember, we're only in '92. We're only about 10 years from the beginning of the whole HIV scourge, and nobody had really gone out of their way to educate the players
Sure.
on how small, if at all, the possibility of catching that virus playing a basketball game. So I'm writing all this stuff down, and I said, "Carl, you sure you want to say this?" And he said, "You quote me. I am. I say what I mean. What I
Right.
say."
Right.
I walked out of the locker room and immediately went to a payphone because we didn't have cell phones.
That's
And I, and
Did
I
you have a
called my
quarter?
office and I called my office and I said, "I think the story has changed." And I told my editor what the quotes were. And she said, "I want you to get on a plane tomorrow and go wherever you have to go in the country for the next 3 days. And you need to report this story out because we need to know whether this is just one man speaking or whether this is the feeling running rampant in the league." And so I did that. I spent the next 3 days going from one preseason game in Detroit to one in Phoenix to I think one in Atlanta, where I knew teams were playing. I knew there were players there that I knew personally, and I interviewed a slew of people. And yes, there was widespread fear in the NBA of competing against Magic with the virus, knowing that the regular season games, how brutally physical they were. And that Friday night, late Friday night, I filed a story. It ran in the Sunday paper. And the very next day after that story ran, Magic went back into retirement. Now, the reason why I tell you this long drawn out story
No, no, it's
is
interesting. I got to
because
find the story.
I have to, the two things. Number one, if I had gotten that interview today, right, the pressure on me to tweet something right away would have been, before he could say the same thing to someone else, would have been enormous.
Right.
And the impact of the story wouldn't have been what it was because it would have just been Karl Malone, and it would have been easy for the world to denounce Karl
Of course.
as an idiot, as an unenlightened idiot, and dismiss it, right? But because I had the time to say, you know what? There is no social media. It's not going to spread like wildfire. I
Right.
have the time to talk this and report it through. But the real reason why I'm telling you this story is because Magic Johnson was one of my two favorite athletes.
Sure.
Through my years, my long career of covering sports journalism, people would always say, who'd you love the most covering and writing about? And I would say, okay, I feel compelled to give you a male athlete and a female athlete. My number one male athlete was Magic Johnson because he really got what media wanted. He was just effervescent.
Yeah.
Plus I loved him as a player who
Oh,
did.
yeah.
Number two, my favorite female athlete was Martina Navratilova. I'm a big tennis fan, played the game, and I just admired her courage as a young woman defecting to this country, the whole 9 yards of her storied career. Um, anyway, Magic being one of my favorite players, a couple of days after the story ran, and I certainly wasn't thrilled to hear that he then retired again, that resulting from the story. I called up his agent and I said, um, uh, would you mind connecting me to Magic? And I guess he connected Magic to a conference call. And I said to him, I just want you to know, Irvin, a lot of us covered the sport, called him Irvin. Um, just want you to know how hard it was for me to write that story because I respect you, I admire you. I've always been in awe of you as a player. You're one of my favorite athletes of all time to watch. And I just want you to know that um, that was not the story that I intended to write, but it was the story that presented itself to me. And, in many of those cases, I've been cursed out by many, many an athlete
I can only
who didn't like
imagine.
what I wrote.
Yeah.
And what he said was, I remember the exact quote was, man, you were just doing your job. I respect that. And he said, in some ways, it unearths, I don't think he used that word, but it unearths the feelings that are being felt around the league. Those you didn't create that.
Right.
And I'm glad that I understand that now. If I am ever going to play again, I and the league have to do a better job of educating the players. And I just, I hung up the phone and I almost was in tears because of how mature
I was about to
and
say,
how kind he was
yeah.
to not be the prototypical angry athlete who's had something written about him that he didn't want to hear. So he'll always have my undying respect and appreciation for who he is, not only as an athlete, but as a human being.
I was going to
And
say,
that's my favorite Dream Team story.
it's amazing. I mean, Karl Malone said he's a competitor. I would position not against Karl, but I would say that makes Magic an amazing competitor too, because he's competing in even a bigger arena, right? Because of not just basketball, but life, world messaging, leadership. That's a fabulous, fabulous story. I'm glad I asked you the question, honestly. And
And of course, for those of your younger listeners who may not be familiar with the flow of Magic's career, he did come back. Um, he did come back a bunch of maybe 2 or 3 years later, And I remember I was at the old LA Forum the night that he made his reappearance.
Reappearance. Yeah.
Yeah, it was only for like half a season. And they were playing the Golden State Warriors, and I'll never forget there was one play where Magic took one of those long push shots that he had, and the rebound came out. It was a high rebound, and it came out to Vlade Divac, who was about right in front of the free throw line. And Vlade, being a very skilled fundamental player,
Yes.
just kind of, you know, touch tapped the rebound to Magic, back to Magic. And there was one guy between Magic and the basket, and it was Latrell Sprewell, who was a young player for the Warriors.
Yep.
Magic did one of these little ball fakes where he just faked a shovel pass to his right,
Yeah.
and there was nobody there, and it was a ghost pass, right? And Sprewell bit and took
Bit.
the fake and nearly fell off his feet. And Magic took one or two dribbles and just gently laid the ball in the basket. And then he ran down court with the coolest look, a little smile on his face. And there's such a difference in the era that he grew up in, because
Yeah.
today's player would have
Yeah.
taken the ball, dunked it, and then trash talked the guy who was sitting on the seat of his pants on the baseline. Uh, it was just a different era where I always used to say about like guys like Walt Frazier, it was cool to be cool,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. 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 No, no, no. A different era. And I just wrote about this the other day. I mean, I wish that people don't know, you know this, of course, but how, Magic and Bird really resurrected the league. It was going in a bad direction, not long after that Nick team that you wrote about. It was not, it wasn't on the rise, but those guys, anyway, it's hard to know. We could probably talk for 100 hours. I'm going to ask you this one last question, and I didn't want to preempt that story because the story you just told me is amazing, but it's my own curiosity. You mentioned Monte Carlo. Um, is that the best place in the world to watch a tennis match, or is that one of the coolest venues ever? Or because that's what it looks like on TV to me. I've never been.
Yeah, I did take a tour of the stadium. I've never seen
Oh, a match.
a
Okay,
match at the Monte Carlo Open. Um, I covered a Davis Cup event when John McEnroe was the Davis Cup captain for one
sure.
season, and that was an incredible experience. But the first one was in Harare, Zimbabwe,
Oh my.
um, and then there was they played the Czech Republic in L.A. Then the third one where they lost, I think it was the semifinal, was in Santander, Spain,
Mm,
which had a tennis facility much like the Monte Carlo one, basically, literally right on the water.
yeah.
So you see those overhead shots of Monte Carlo, which are gorgeous.
Yes,
I
that's why I
did,
was asking.
yeah, I did go to the stadium to just look at it, but I haven't actually been. My oldest son, is a big tennis fan. He's always saying, "Dad, we got to go to Monte Carlo," it really launches the clay court season. My favorite sports venue in the world for all sports has always been Wimbledon. I covered
Sure.
it maybe 12,
That was,
13 times,
yeah.
and it's just, oh, it's magical. Um, it's so unlike the U.S. Open, which is all cement and
Yes,
hot
I've been
spell
there.
in, late August here in New York. Um, but Wimbledon just is all green, and there's a timelessness about it. I mean, if it weren't for the electronic scoreboard and the roof that they put on, you know, or an occasional plane flying overhead, it might as well be 1910 there. It just feels timeless and wonderful. In 2018, I was able to take my sons and my wife there. I felt like as my career was winding down, that end of it anyway, that I always wanted them to get the opportunity to sit on center court. So I was able to get tickets, and
Nice.
my two boys sat on center court for this epic five-set match between Rafa Nadal and the Argentine player. What's his? I'm drawing a blank just because it's my age. Um, it was a five-setter, and
Yeah.
my older son came out and said, "Dad, that's the best sporting event I've ever been at." and he'd been to World Series games and NBA Finals games. And I had said to him, Alex, there's something about that center court arena that is just special. And he got it, which made me feel really good.
Yeah, watching Rafa compete has always been one of my favorite things to do. I just something about that dude. I joke, not joke. I say all the time, the Spaniards have figured it out.
Yeah,
As
yeah.
far as building programs and so forth. I cannot thank you enough. Like I said, if I was next year, I'd have given you about 4 hugs during this call. Whether you would accept them or not is none of my business. I'd still
I'm a
do.
hugging kind of guy. So
So,
my sons and I hug all the time.
yeah,
So,
so
Barry, thank you so much. It was a pleasure for me. And doing these kinds of podcasts that's conversational with someone who is as knowledgeable as you are and has the history to contribute as well makes it so much more pleasurable. So
yeah, thank you.
thank you for having me.
You're a joy. I feel like I've known you now forever. I grew up on an asphalt court just like you, essentially, in a longest residential row house block in Philly. I joke people all the time. We grew up on the same court, just 90 miles apart. Kind of a thing. And I think that sets a tone for being able to do this. So I thank you. Please send me the link for the book. I don't want to take any more of your time, although we could probably talk for hours. If you make it to the Bay Area where I am, or if I get back there, I'm going to look you up because I'd love to shake hands and so forth. But I really do appreciate it more than I can probably express here, and I don't want to fumble all over myself, so I won't. So stay safe, Harvey. Thank you so much, and
You too.
you stay well.
Have a great holiday season.
You too. Thank you so much.
Bye bye.